Okay, so now let's get into some of the best practices. How should you take on this project? So whether you've read the book or not, these are the steps that you'll want to take. The first suggestion is to tackle in categories, not rooms. So many of the books that you'll read will tell you to start at one end of your house and work room by room through to the other end. So maybe you start at the front door and you just work your way through your whole house. In this strategy, we're really talking about categories instead. So a category would be clothing, a category would be your books, a category would be all electronics. So you're going to start with that method, and I'm going to show you kind of where I deviated from that. And again, it's what makes sense for you. So we talked about, again, back in the very beginning, we talked about doing things your way, which is very, very important. So we're going to talk about tackling categories, but when you feel the need to deviate, go ahead and deviate. So I don't want you to feel like that's a hard and fast rule, but it's definitely the way to get started is to look at categories. And we're going to start with clothing, which I think is the best way to get this project started. And it's certainly the way suggested in the book. The second thing is this toss test. That's my unofficial name for it. And again, we talked about it initially. Check in with each item as you're touching it. Decide if it brings you joy. And if it doesn't, if it falls short, let it go. Now, obviously, some things are very utilitarian. You may have, a coat that is weatherproof and you absolutely need it, but it doesn't necessarily bring you joy. It's kind of a neutral feeling. That's okay, as long as it doesn't bring you guilt, doesn't make you feel bad when you wear it or use it. Make sure you're keeping things for the right reason. And my personal experience is I found I got better at this. Initially, it was a little bit tough. And especially, I started with the clothing and there were some things I could easily get rid of and other things that were like, and I held on to them. And then I found maybe a week later, I was able to start getting rid of them. And it's been about 3 months since I've started this project. And I find I'm even better at it, that I'm really able to look at some of the stuff that I saved initially in my clothing and get rid of it now. So I find that you will get better at this toss test. So don't feel like, okay, I can't quite tell if it brings me joy or not. I'm just too confused. Really, you will get better. So just keep working at it, do the best you can, and know that over time you'll get good at this. Tidy in one time period and not a little at a time. This definitely needs some clarification. In the book, she tells you just kind of set aside a time and really go through it. But one time period does not mean one day, 10 hours, one weekend. It really just means that you're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it till it's done. So however long that takes is how long it takes. It doesn't, so there is no, you must do this in 10 days. You must do this in 21 days. It's not like that. It's really what works for you. So as I said, I started this 3 months ago and I'm still going. And I've slowed down a bit. I started off, very, very quickly. And some categories like clothing and books are very easy to tackle. But some of the other stuff's a little bit more difficult. And some of the things, in my case, they're in rooms that aren't heated. And it's very cold right now. So I'm going to tackle those rooms later when things warm up. So really, one time period is really your definition of a time period. It just means that you're going to start and it's not going to be done until you say it's done. So you're not going to take 3 months off. You're going to keep working at it at your own pace, but have it all be done. So don't kind of drag this out to be a year. You're not looking for that, but you're looking for something that really makes sense for you. Discard first and then organize. This is a great tip. So once you're dealing with something like your clothing, make sure that you first get rid of everything and then go back and try to organize it. Don't try to just do a little bit at a time and then put all those back into place. And we'll go through that step by step and this will make more sense later. But the first thing is to do all the tossing first. So do that toss test on everything in the category that you're going to work with and then look at what you have left to organize. The next tip I think is excellent is don't buy organizers. You really, really don't need to. You don't need all those fancy gadgety things in the stores. They're very cool. They're interesting, they're creative, but you don't need to buy them. Maybe later you might want to, but for now use shoe boxes and existing items. And what I found was as I went through my house and as I was cleaning, I would come up with extra shoe boxes and I just started a little pile of extra stuff. A little shelving thing that I had some shoes on, a little rolling cart that had all kinds of stuff that I no longer needed. But I saved the rolling cart. And as I went through room to room, I found that I was able to reuse the stuff. So at the end, my pile was pretty small. So during the process, the pile got pretty big. But by the time I finished all my kids' closets and other things, I wound up using most of these things. So I was able to reuse the existing organizing items that I had. So after all is said and done, you may want to go back, and if you have a specific need, you may want to buy an organizer, but you really don't need to initially. Just start with boxes. Even if they're like an Amazon shipping box, you might be able to reuse that. So don't go out and buy all kinds of fancy materials. And in the end, really tweak this as what makes sense for you. So we're going to go through each category, and I really want you to follow what makes sense. Don't feel like you have to do things in a certain order. Clothing, I think, is, this is what she suggests you go first with, and it's how I started, and I really felt that made the most sense for me. If you're a guy, that may not be the best start for you, but I think for a lot of women, we tend to have more clothes than we need, and it tends to be a burden, and it's easier to let go of clothes than a lot of other things. Like when you get over here to some of your other items, it might be a little bit harder to get rid of them, but when you're over here in your clothing section, I think you'll find that it's easier to get rid of clothes than anything else. So that's why the suggestion is to start with clothing. So again, work with what pace works for you. Start and stop when you need to start and stop. But don't feel like this has got to be done correctly 100% the first time. Because as I said, I go back now and I'm still pairing things out of my clothes. I got rid of 2 things just this morning. So you'll find that you're going to get really, really good at this. You're going to get really, really good at the toss test as things go on. So don't strive for perfection. Just get started and let's get going. In the next section, we'll talk about the materials that you need.